Okay, started a couple minutes late here, but I think I'm the only one here, so that's okay. How's everybody this morning? I'm just starting to drink on my coffee, so I'm not quite awake yet. So I'm getting ready to start a new painting. This was sort of like a last minute idea come together. I've sketched down, I know it's pretty light, but it's just a line drawing on the paper so far, this face. And it's a girl with her tongue out, and I'm going to replace the tongue with cactus. That's my plan for this guy. So, I have entirely the wrong chair for this desk over here right now. But we will make do. All right. I have my iPad over here so that I can look at some cactus pictures and decide what I like to draw in here. I'm kind of leaning towards like these sort of here, let's make that bigger, this sort of shape, just the big flat leaves. I think that can work in pretty well in place of a tongue, so we'll gotta add that on here before I do anything else. Get a slightly darker pencil, maybe. There should be one somewhere. You know, literally just cleaned in here. There we go. Just your run-of-the-mill number 2 mechanical pencil. Nothing fancy. Eraser. I think I'm probably going to want to change a little bit, maybe, of how it is positioned. So, let's see. I don't know, can you see much of that? I'm not sure about this angle that's happening. The problem with drawing dark enough so that it can be seen on the camera versus erasable is a little bit of a thing, but I also am pretty good at just figuring out ways to make things work, so I'm not too worried about it. It helps that I'm not too worried about being a perfectionist on here. Like, I don't care that much if things are perfect. That's not what I'm doing. That's not my concern. It's just it's more about evoking something, and usually in my work it's like emotions or feelings or something along those lines. So let's see. I think I would like for it to kind of come into this space a little bit more. I don't know, do I want it to be that big? Maybe like here. This has a very, this is making me immediately think of like very much pop art and Liechtenstein type things where the speech bubbles from the girls, but it probably will not look like that when this is all said and done. Okay. Marking about where the shadow would be. See if I can pick up any of this lines that I don't want there anymore. These guides. Okay. And the needles on these leaves come in like a little bit of a pattern. So I will just at least add little like dots so I know where that's gonna be. There would be some coming around the side, I believe. Go off the edge there. Okay. All right. Something like that, just because there'll be a difference in color going on there. I'm working on a watercolor pad again. And the idea is just to have the sketch, basic sketch, this is about what I need or want, and to go from here with some washes. So I've got my trusty palette over here. Actually move things a little bit to the side. See a little better. It's my brush rest. I love this thing. I got it on Etsy, and it just is like a ceramic work with a little butter or rainbow stamp on it, and it's got the little divots in it where you rest your brush. So it's not laying flat on the table or whatever your surface is. So I like that a lot. I think that's pretty nice to have. Okay. So we will start with a larger brush for some big washes. And just get some things laid down. Let me think. How do I want to do this girl? I might start with a bit of an overall warm, like underpainting, and then build up layers for the shadow. So yeah, okay, let's start with that. So I'm going to grab a couple of warmer red tones as well as some yellow. Plenty of water, because I don't want this to be too dark, too saturated. It's just a wash. We're getting there. A little more yellow. Back and forth till it is what I need. Okay, that's pretty good. So let's see, is there anywhere I could even have a bigger brush for this, honestly. Big old mop of some sort. Gonna get some color on here. I'm even gonna go over at least a little bit of this cactus and wash that out, because those colors will meld a little. I have no idea what happened to my roll of paper towels that I keep in here. I think they have been grabbed. That's okay. That's okay. We make things work. So the way I work with watercolor, it's a lot of building. It's building up and getting to the depth and layers. There's a lot of different ways you can approach working with watercolors, and you can use a very deliberate, like, I'm placing these colors in pretty close to the saturation you want right off the bat, and that would make a very quick piece. But I kind of like to build a lot of layers instead. And yeah, this layer isn't very important. It's just sort of establishing a little bit of where some darks and shadows might be. Getting a little bit of warmth to begin with because, well, that's human skin. Is generally pretty much always going to have at least some warmth to it. And that's, you know, life, a little bit of life. So let me think. I'm not going to worry too much about getting into intense shadows beyond about what I have here. Okay. I think that's a good place to start. Actually add a little bit on the teeth too, just because teeth aren't pure white. Ever see those people who have done all the whitening on their teeth, like to the extent that they almost like glow? It looks, it always rubs me wrong because it's a little bit inhuman. It looks very fake, like you could just be a CGI character or something else, because bone is not like white, like a sheet of paper white. It just doesn't naturally exist that way. Even if you never drink a cup of coffee or a red wine or anything in your life, it's not, no. It really is inhuman and creepy and looks bizarre. But to each their own, of course. I drink a lot of coffee, and my teeth are not day glow white, and I'm okay with that. It doesn't faze me one bit, as long as I keep them clean. But anyway, yeah, so I'm gonna let this dry just a little bit. It's very important, one very important thing when working with watercolors is to not overwork your paper real heavily with a lot of water, because, well, you end up with a mess. And there's kind of no going back. You can overwork your paper, it can get muddy, you can actually start to wreck the surface of the paper a little bit. Like if it gets too oversaturated and, well, it's oversaturated, you're brushing across it, you'll start to like lift it. And I don't want to do that, especially at this early of a stage. I don't want to do that at all, but that could really make things very difficult for me. This is not like a real important thing that I'm doing right now, though, you know, in terms of, I don't, like, this isn't part of a body of work necessarily. I mean, we'll see once it's done. Maybe it'll fit something, but right, I'm just chose something to work on that I thought might be kind of fun and not have a lot of expectations about it, not be stressed out about it. So, yeah, maybe now that I've got this layer on her face, and I'm going to leave that alone for it to dry, you can see, I think the camera is actually picking up where the paper is like getting wavy because it's wet. This is a 140-pound watercolor block, but you'll definitely still have some of that happening, especially with a larger piece like this, because there's the edges that are glued down or further apart. But I am going to add, the way that I did a base for her face here, I'm going to do a little bit on this cactus leaf tongue too. And for that, I'm going to go in the opposite direction and go cool. least at the far part of it. It'll kind of bleed out. The colors of her will merge out, and then the color of the cactus leaf will be kind of what it becomes. So just a light wash with this guy here. A little more water. And you can't probably even hardly see that because of the lighting. It is very, very light. I've barely put any color on here. A little bit now? Yeah. Okay. As far as what's going to happen on the rest of this piece, I'll definitely be working into it with a lot of my mixed media approach for some elements that will get layered in. I think I might, though, do a little bit of the watercolor as an extension coming away from her. So the most obvious solution for, like, if I want her to stand out, her base color is orange, and for the background, then I'd want to push that back so she pops forward. And I'll probably use something with it needs to be a cool tone, not overly saturated. Although the way I work, a lot of things will happen between now and finished. But I'm gonna go with a little bit of a purple, a grade purple, I think, to start anyway, just to push things back. Okay, you see that color? I should work a little more saturated so you can at least see what I'm doing. There, that's more intense than it will be in the end, but that will get our layer down. Keep those edges wet, right? I do let my palette get a little built up with colors here. When I'm mixing, I kind of like the way that I can neutralize tones a little bit if I want to by just like working that way. It's like having a seasoned palette. It's easy enough to clean a watercolor palette. You just have to wipe it up a little bit, but I enjoy that. A little more depth. In about any other media, I go very intense with my colors. But I guess that's the contrast of using watercolor, is what I like to work off and build more on top of. Is that creates a bit of contrast in and of itself. Okay, right now, it just looks like a hot mess. A lot's gonna change. Yeah, I trust the process a little bit, and the first layers are just never the nice looking stuff. So yes, Anyway, still cool to the touch, still wet. So, this is, there's something that I both like and love about watercolor, or like and dislike about working with watercolor versus other mediums. And, well, I've worked with acrylic a lot and now a little bit with oil, but working with those mediums, I have this inherent like anxiety about setting up my palette. And if I put down the right colors, and then if I paint and I don't use the colors I put down, it's like this idea that I'm wasting it so much, or I'm going to feel pressured to use colors that I don't actually in the end think I need in the painting just because I put them on the palette. And especially with acrylic, you have to work pretty fast because once the palette starts to get dried up, there's all these things. It's like it becomes this stressful game where I just want to be able to create. And with watercolor, you can definitely do that. Like I could lay down literally one brush stroke and leave the room and not come back for hours, and that's fine. Like, doesn't change anything about the palette or the painting or anything else. I can work for as short of periods as I want. Never worry about screwing up the palette because it's just dried in the palette. You just add water, you use your water and saturate it as you need. So that works for me a lot. And the flip side though is avoiding overworking, letting it dry between layers, especially when you're at this early stage where it looks like a hot mess of nothing. And you're like anxious to see something start to happen. It's like, no, you gotta let it do its thing. You gotta let it dry. Let it be. So yeah, it's an interesting, very opposite kind of dynamic to working with one medium versus another. Acrylic is not the same kind of stress acrylic is worse than working with oil. Oil isn't quite so bad because your paints will stay decent for a while on the palette. It's not like you have an hour of good paint time and after that it's questionable. But I'm still getting comfortable with working with oils too and figuring out what those lines are about how long to keep paint on the palette or not. Okay. In there. Some people use like dryers, hair dryers, or otherwise heat source to like dry their stuff faster. But yeah, that would be a fun stream. Just listen to the dryer as I move it back and forth on the painting. Anyway. So how was everybody's weekend? It's like Monday morning. It's always hard to get moving and going for me. Wake up and do things. Especially because I hadn't totally set, like I had the idea in my head for what to do here, but the weekend ended up being kind of crazy and I didn't end up having the time to put towards this. So it's like almost midnight last night. It's like, oh my God, I didn't get this ready to go. But managed to get something on paper before I hit the go live button. So here we are. But yeah, the weather was icky up here outside of Chicago. We had some bad weather on Saturday, and yesterday they did get the roads cleaned up. I think it's quite cold today. Good day to stay in and paint with the coffee. Yeah. There was football games yesterday. If anyone follows the sports balls, we did have those on. Championship football games. Yeah, to determine who goes to the Super Bowl. And yeah, when the weather comes in, sometimes that gives me a migraine. I'm prone to migraines. Yay me. So that was my Saturday, trying to be human. It's not fun. I every now and again I think I have them really well under control, and then they come back and I have them badly again, and it's a constant give and take with those watched pot, you know, waiting for the paint to dry. We're getting close enough to work though. Yeah, we're getting there. Okay. Okay. I really wish I'd brought my drafting chair over here instead of this regular desk chair. 'Cause I feel like the table's up to here. I mean, I'm trying to paint. Not the most productive. Oh. I may not have my paper towels in here, but I have a regular towel that is kind of a raggy guy, so we'll just use that today. And it's greener, so yay. All right. Almost put that in my coffee right now. That just almost happened. All right. So I'm going to start a shadow layer. Lay down some of my shadow colors. I'm just going to stand up and try not to put my head in front of the, try not to like stick my head in front of the camera so you can't see what I'm doing. And not put my brush in my coffee. Okay. What do we want here? Get some blues. Now I'll go a little bit more deliberately to start laying in where my cool tones will be, where shadows are at this point. So, here we go. Sure. I think I'm picking up something in my palette that's coming off on here. It's not the paper. I don't know. Anyway. Okay. We're getting somewhere a little bit. Push the darks a little bit more in a couple spots. Okay, so this is kind of how my paintings tend to start, my watercolor paintings. It's still looking a little, it's still very flat, of course. Got a long way to go to add a lot of depth. Not have her looking like some flat, weird cartoon character, but that's okay. That's what the process is. This got real flat in a hurry too. It's large expanse of flesh. What's going to help that is getting it to really go dark where it's going back. Her ear would be about here. So the shadow will get a lot darker coming this way, and we'll just have to build that up a little bit. And let's see. All right. And at that point where I need to stop working on it and let it dry a bit. Thing is, like, this is truly not the stage to be like adding details, really. It's just creating shapes. That's the priority right now, is shapes, not details. Where are my darks? Where are my lights? How are they interacting with each other? Maybe at this point, I'll add in some points on the cactus. You know what, I'm going to give it a light wash first because I don't want them to be like hard edges. So it'll be what we call wet on wet watercolor. So that will kind of, whatever I lay down on top of this now that I've wetted it, will just bleed out a little bit. I need a little bit more color on the palette. Okay, here we go. Don't let it dry too much before I get it done. So I don't know how well the camera's picking up that detail of those dots kind of pulling out. Some of them are some are better than the others in terms of how they're doing it, depending on how wet the paper was there, but that's kind of what I want at this stage of the game, is just that little indication of where they are. Oh, hi Jim, hi Mary. Honestly, I started late too today. I was about 15 minutes late getting going because I was all discombobulated this morning. All right, I think, again, time to let it dry. Monday mornings, right? Do the best we can. So I've just been I started with just a basic line drawing to get this painting started, and right now I have 2 layers of wash on it. One just was a base warm layer, and then I started working on some of this like purpley shadow, and just keep building it up a little bit at this stage. I'll go back in and add another, like a warmer mid-tone wash next for the face. Highlights are paper when it comes to watercolor, so you're not really, outside of toning them at some point, not really laying in highlights. So Yes, I'm gonna let this guy dry up a little bit before I continue on. You could tell, I don't know how much, if you work with watercolors and you think it might be dry, but if you place your hand on it and the papers are cool, you know, it's not quite there yet. I mean, when we get to a certain point, it's probably okay to start going, but just trying to avoid overworking and wrecking the paper for myself and try to not do that. But anyway, here we are. This is not fully thought through composition in terms of what I have here is all that I have so far in my mind, and the rest will just this is going to have to be a very intuitive painting, as many of mine kind of are. Some are more fleshed out beforehand, but just working up all the stuff. Having coffee, exercise bike. They're much more motivated to do well than I am today. That's a good start to the Monday. Yeah, open sketch, they're nice for sketching, that's for sure, because it's so fast to lay down. And it's just sort of a matter of building more layers to take it from sketch to anything else. But it is nice. It is a nice way to if I do sketches for clients, like an illustration somebody needs, and I might lay down some washes with either watercolor to give an idea of what the colors could be, or to come up with a couple different variations. But sometimes, based on how I'm working and how quick something needs to be turned around, I even kind of fake that in in Procreate or Photoshop. You can kind of do your watercolor washes digitally, and then you don't have to wait for anything to dry. It just depends on what you're trying to achieve and how fast you're trying to work. And paper doesn't have an undo button, so sometimes when it comes to working for somebody else, it's nice to have that option, at least in that stage of the game. In the end, it's what do they want? Do they want a watercolor? Do they want a digital piece? Whatever. But yeah, we're coming. Was it 2 years ago now? It's hard to believe it's been 2 years ago. I did a watercolor portrait every day for 100 days as a personal project. And it would be watercolor portraits, and then I do some mixed media stuff on it. It was a twofold challenge to myself, to challenge myself to get better at watercolor, and also to play on paper, to play on canvas. And I couldn't think about it too much because it had to be done in a day. So it was just just go, just do. Don't think too much, just do. And it was a great exercise. Learned a lot. Super burnt out by the time I got to day 100, but it was a really great project to finish. And I really did learn a lot. And it was shocking to me that I finished it, because I'm not that person. I've done those inking October challenges and stuff like that, and I usually will start off I'll get a few days in and I just lose it. I just kind of forget that I'm doing it. Days get away, and it's whoops, I was supposed to be doing a thing, I didn't do it. So amazing that it happened. That's motivation. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's fun. It is a challenge. It's very different. If you have spent most of your creative life working with oil or acrylic or something like that, it's very much having to shift your thinking to work in watercolor, because you can't paint your whites in, you can't paint your lights in. You can tone your light colors, but your paper is it. If you paint over it, there's no undo. You can't cover it up. But for some reason, that's less stressful to me than putting my other paint on a palette. I don't know. It depends on the day and the piece, for sure. But yeah, in the classes I have with the kids, they generally work in a lot of acrylic. And I always encourage them by telling them, you can't really mess anything up, because you can always paint over your mistakes. But as long as they let the paint dry first. That's, you know, a thing, but yeah, you can't do that with watercolor. There is no undo. You can work with things. You can sometimes work with mistakes if there's certain types of mistakes, but yeah, there's a point in which there's no fixing. Okay, I'm close. I'm thinking it might be fun to draw the needles on the I was going to say porcupine. I'm not awake today. I've had only half a cup of coffee. The needles on the cactus with maybe ink or something, possibly. Because you know, that again, it's a different type of contrast, different materials to make it very sharp and hard. And it's weird, but still a little bit threatening. Something like that. We'll see. We'll see. I have a long way to go before I'm working on that level of detail. But it is totally, like, I watched a demo with an art guild that I'm a member of where a professional watercolor artist did this piece, and it was like a woman in a dress on a beach with rocks behind her and sky, and he did it all with like maybe 2 layers of paint, and it took him less than an hour to finish it. That was insane. Like I definitely don't work that way. I think you really have a specific type of ability to control exactly what's happening with every single brush stroke. It's got to be so deliberate. And it's more like, for me, it's more like a build. It's like a modeling effect where instead of I'm just going to paint in the shadow tone here in this shape, and that's my shadow. I feel like it's almost creating a sculpture of layering and layering until it becomes dimensional and feels like you could reach out and touch a face. I mean, not to say I'm not a realist like that. It's not really that real, but just that feel. A feel of dimensionality by building over time. Okay, my cactus is still wet, but I think I can move on to another layer on my face. I'm going to stick with my big brush for this time again. And let's see. I'm just trying to think about the skin tone at this point, what tone I want to bring out for her. Not too golden, I don't think. A little more on the pink side, perhaps, like a warm pink. Let's see. It's really not bad, but it's very close to my base layer. There is white in the watercolor palette, but that's generally, like, you can use it to mix a tone to brush on, but you're never going to actually paint white on your painting. That generally just won't happen for you. All right, so fleshy mid-tone, something pretty pink. Yeah, I even get my hands involved when I'm painting with watercolor. There is no stopping me. Oh, brush string or hair. Get that out of there. Come on. Actually, I think that was a cat hair. Such is life. Okay. Well, that layer went on very quickly. Blend out some of these lines here a little bit. That was a real harsh edge. That didn't need to be so hard. You can pick up a little bit of paint, a little bit of the color. But generally speaking, you got to know that if you put it down, there's a good chance it's staying there. So you got to be okay with your brush strokes. Can start to let some things happen with color. Let there be some little pools of color where there might naturally be. Okay. Oh, we're starting to get a little bit of depth there. Grabbed a second slightly drier brush so I can sort of control a little bit more of where things are going and happening. Okay. Reached a point of saturation here. Let it be. Still looks pretty flat to me, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Making progress. One of the tricky things is when you're working kind of fast to not lose track of where the couple of places where you want to leave the paper completely white. That can be pretty easy to do, like accidentally brush over something that you don't mean to. Okay. I know I said I need to stop for a minute and let it dry, and I keep fussing around. This is a problem. This is a real problem for working this way. The struggle is real. Okay, seriously, setting my brush down. Okay, let it dry. Not bad for having been at this for about an hour-ish. A little less than. Long way to go, but it is coming. It takes a lot, especially on a bigger piece, like if I was working very small, of course things would go much, much faster, but building up and trying to get these really dark shadows on this side, it's a little slower going when I'm working in a lot of huge, large washes. But that is okay. See, here I go again. Can't trust myself with anything. I think one of the next things I'll probably do is give the background another wash. That's feeling super, super flat. Still have some wet bits on the cactus, so I'm not going to fuss with that yet. And let's see. I'm going to push the background more towards blue or purple. Right now, I think that was kind of my intention at first, but it ended up being a much warmer purple. It needs to be cooler, I think. That's what I'm thinking. See, still screwing around with it. Down. I need a hand to slap my hand when I go to pick up my brush at this point. It's too dry. This is pretty good. This is not the most expensive watercolor paper. I do have Arches paper. That's probably the nicest one I have, and a couple of sheets where I can cut it down and paint with them that I picked up, but it's nice to have something that's not crazy expensive but still is pretty good quality to work with. I don't recommend on working on anything less than 140-pound paper. I think that really restrains you in terms of what you can do at all. I don't know. I haven't worked with it much. I think I had some at one point I played with, and it just it's too much of a challenge to be worth any savings. And you can get 140-pound paper that's not too expensive, I think. It is expensive. I was pretty shocked initially about how expensive watercolor paper could be when I started getting back into working with it pretty regularly. The brand is Fluid on this one. It's good. I've worked on it. The David Bowie portrait that I finished was on this paper. It'll handle quite a bit of abuse it'll take a decent amount of, quite a lot of layers if you don't overwork them too much. And yeah, I think it's one of the better affordable ones out there. I have a whole ton of little watercolor sketchbooks too that are kind of nice for just ideas and practicing stuff. I forgot this was even in there. This is pretty old. Oh, wrong way. That was just like a two-toned, quick study. And this one was like maybe 3 layers. This was a quick one. So yeah, working smaller I think is easier to do that kind of thing with. Let's try watercolor you. Mary Beth, always have to rag along to help. Sometimes I just let it run. Yeah, you know, how much you control it, like I think we have a tendency to want to over control it, but by letting go a little bit and letting the medium do what the medium does can be interesting. Artistico. Oh yeah, the costs of watercolor supplies of paint, any art supplies, well, geez, of everything, right? I know at one point early in like the pandemic when things were shut down, paints themselves were really difficult to come by because apparently there's some certain paints and certain pigments that are made exclusively like in France or different places. And it becomes very, very difficult to, oh my goodness. There's things everywhere. I think I mentioned before how I just cleaned in here. Anyway, somewhere I picked up these little, it's like postcards, watercolor postcards. The back actually has like a little postcard thing, so you could paint it and send it to a person. But this was $6 on sale, and how many sheets are in here? Decent amount in there. Looks like 12 4x6 postcards, and it doesn't actually tell me what kind of paper it is, like the weight of it. It doesn't necessarily look like it's 140 pound, but working that small, that might be okay. So there's things like that. This was something I don't know why. I saw this and I had to have it. Look how tiny this is. This is the size, the palm of my hand, and it is a tiny little watercolor notebook. Stonehenge, which is by Legion. It's a Legion brand, which is a pretty good brand. This is really heavy stuff. It doesn't tell me, again, outside of it being cold pressed. This was $2. I have not done a thing with it, but I think it's adorable. Do I seal the postcards before sending? I think if you were going to mail it and you really cared about the quality of them arriving well, then yeah. I don't usually seal my watercolor paintings unless it's for somebody. If it's a commission or something, they ask me to. Like, I talk to them about how you can portray or what you can do with your watercolors. And generally, I think that it's best to just put them behind glass without sealing, because the paper is generally going to be porous. So almost anything you put on there to seal it will affect the finish and potentially the colors and things. It is something you can do if someone wants it to do that, or if you want to do that. If you want to actually mail a painting like that in a postcard, I probably would. But it can have, it can change things. It can make things look a little bit different. So you just have to kind of weigh the pros and cons of it, maybe even do little tests on little scraps of paper. Yeah, I don't know if this is the same as the drawing paper exactly. I'll show you again. It's a Stonehenge Aqua color press, and up in the top it says, in the corner here, it says Legion, we are paper. if I'm someplace unusual that I'm not usually, like if going into the city or something like that, if I see, there's two places I will always stop, and that's local bookstores and local art supply stores. And even if I don't have a budget to buy anything, I'll try to pick something up. And this was, like I said, it was $1.99. And I couldn't resist. I will find something to do with these tiny papers. I adore them. But I've had it for about 2 years and I still haven't done anything with it. This is this is the second book like this that I've had. And it's a little bit pricier for a watercolor journal, I guess. Shizen design. I'm probably saying it wrong. It's got a little tie for traveling. I don't generally travel. I don't with it anywhere, but it's a really nice bound cover with stitching, real thick, and the pages are really, really very thick. Very textured, clearly hard press. I don't have the tag that was with it that says what exactly it was anymore, but it's definitely a hard press paper. There is a difference between the front and back of painting on, like, because I'm a crazy person, and the last one I had I filled up, so I started painting on the backs of some pages too. This overworks very easily. It's I picked this up at Dick Blick. It wasn't crazy expensive, because if it was, I wouldn't have bought it. But I can't tell you exactly how much it was at this time. But it's pretty nice, and it has a decent amount of pages in it. A lot of times you buy the watercolor, and it's like, you're spending $30 for a small notebook of 12 to 20 pages. So that's a thing. Yeah, this is really nice. I haven't really broken this one in yet. Is that all I got? These are much cheaper version of those postcards that I had. Strathmore is definitely known to be a brand of sketchbooks and drawing paper pads. And they have the little, there's all of one left in there. It's the postcard, the 4x6 inch with the actual, you can mail it on the back. And this one had 15 sheets, and it is 140 pound. These are totally fine for working on. I've done a lot of, this was extremely affordable, and it was great for just doing quick studies and things. The fanciest paper I have maybe is, I like Arches a lot for if I'm doing work for clients, especially because it's very good quality. Little pricier. And then another thing from Shizen, which is the brand that this was that I picked up at some point. It must have been on sale. Is this little pack of papers. I've used one of them, and I used it back when I really didn't know what the heck I was doing, and so I kind of wasted it. But these are this really beautiful paper, cold pressed rag paper. 300 GSM. So this is twice the weight of a lot of the other stuff I'm working on. Very textured. Really it's kind of sexy. It's just so much texture, and it takes the color and the paper so nice from the paint. And a random other thing that I bought but haven't tried yet, I'm a little weary. Watercolor boards. This is something new from Crescent. It's basically watercolor paper mounted on board, and I really don't know how that's going to be for how well it's going to absorb color. I'm very curious about how this is going to work. They are pretty thick. It's like a very thick illustration board or card matting board. Very heavy. No bend to it at all. So that's another thing that I bought to try and haven't tried yet. I will at some point play around with more of these and see. I know I have at least one more watercolor sketchbook someplace else that I've been working out of. So yeah, doing a lot of random things and going off on long tangents about watercolor paper. I'm sure everybody's fallen asleep in their coffees. I'm sorry. But on the bright side, we're pretty dry. And I'm going to get some color ready to go. Looking for a pipette. If I'm going to mix a decent amount of color, it's kind of nice to use these little, it's like a little squeezy pipette to put some water right into my palette, into the colors that I want to use. I'll use some Payne's Gray and some of my blue, and that will help soften them up a decent amount so I can grab them pretty easily. So I just give them a second for that. And let them saturate a little. All right, that's really dark blue, so pull some purple back in there. And I'd like to neutralize it a little bit, so let's get some of our maybe yellow ochre. Help to gray it out a little. Maybe a little more, just a little bit more. I know so many painters can tell you exactly like which paints they're mixing together at any given time for any given effect. I can't, because I don't remember things. Like I know the names of a few of the colors, but I forget the minute it's squeezed in there, and I go on, and then I have to like go and look up, okay, which one was it if I need to buy it again. I'm so bad like at remembering things like that. It's really terrible. Anyway, let's do another layer on my background here. Another probably cat hair. I was going to say, when I thought I saw a brush strand in my painting earlier, I was really surprised because this is really a very nice brush, and I haven't had it lose hairs really, I think, at all. So that would have shocked me, but a cat hair being on the paper floating around in here, no, that does not shock me at all. Not even a little bit. I'm not worried about the edges because they're not going to stay like this. I need more of my tone here, but now I know what I'm mixing together, so I can do it pretty quickly. Get this a little bit more saturated. Okay, here we go. It's darker. Let's stop messing around. Pull it up a little bit. All right, let that go for a second. Let it do its thing for a moment. Too easy to get too fussy. No point in getting fussy. Not the way I work. I talk about it a lot, but getting away from perfectionism, I think, has huge benefits for anybody, no matter how you work. Even if you are like into creating realism and photorealistic images of what you're creating, I think there's benefits to at least having some times where you let go of trying to control every detail But for me, perfectionism, like holding on to that kind of thing, is so paralyzing that I actively work to not allow that to be the way that I think and function with my art. I'm pulling in some of this color from the outside that I'm using as a shadow to create the shadows coming from this side too. Mix a little more. Trying to keep this nice and decently saturated. So I really want this to fall away. So by hearkening to the background tones, that will help with that. But I don't want it to get too flat either. That looks like a lot at the moment. But it will get balanced out. Especially since I'm sitting so low over here, it's helping me to look at the camera and see how the painting's going to get the look at it. So I'm like so seeing it from almost an angle sitting in this chair. Okay. Where's my towel? There it is. Flat there, but it's a push and pull of control this, but don't control that. Try not to put my hand in the painting. That would be a nice thing to not do. See, now I'm still not getting like full on into detail because there's still more like builds that has to happen, but I am starting to build some smaller shapes than I was doing with my big washes. And probably after this I'll switch to smaller brush and start. I will still need to build up a little bit more flesh tones in some spots. Okay. See how dark that little spot by the eye looks, and like where the nostril is looks so dark at the moment? As that dries, that will definitely not stay looking that dark. That's why I use a lot of layers, because I do want some darks, and things tend to fade away a little bit. Yeah, Mary Beth, yeah, it's smart to even write it out. I don't even do, I should do that too. Yeah, that's, I find that to be an issue, which is kind of funny, especially when teaching, where it's like, I know what the color is. I can reach out and grab the tube and look at it and say, this is what we need. I have trouble pulling the word out of my head for the name of it, but that disconnect can sometimes appear to be discrediting, you know, if that makes sense. Like, it makes you feel like, at least I feel like it looks like I don't know what I'm talking about, and I just have to let that go, because my brain is my brain. I can't, there's limited amounts of things that I can change about having a poor memory. Well, yeah, if you set your palette exactly the same, Mary Beth, that's smart too. I sometimes do that depending on what I'm doing. Like, my watercolor palette never changes. Every now and again, I'll find some other color and be like, ooh, I want to add this in there. But I tend to keep the same colors. If anything, I could potentially even like weed some out of this palette. Still don't know what I have to like look up what the names are of the tubes that I bought. Yeah. The bottom. New colors go to the bottom of the palette before you decide to incorporate them. Yeah, that's smart. You got to have some kind of a process other than just pure chaos. I mean, chaos can work, right? It's it can. I definitely spend a lot of time dabbling in chaos around here, but it's not efficient, that's for sure. And it can make things a lot harder on yourself. Here, thought I might get through one stream without dropping something, but alas, I dropped my box of pastels that were on the side there. It's amazing. It's a special talent that I have. Bowl in a china shop. Human wrecking ball. However you want to look at it. Okay, let's put these out of my elbow's reach, maybe. And And I've also, in the process of attempting to organize things a little bit here, have created a bin of like projects where I started to do something or figure out how to do something or wanted to do a thing, started it, never finished it. So I put them in a bin so they're all in one place. I'll probably forget that bin exists. Like I can see it from here. It's right over there. It's blue. It's on the shelf. It's a big bin. But out of sight, out of mind, even though it is visually there, I don't see the things. And even when the sad thing is, previously to that, they were just under my desk. Like I need them to be out of the way, but they're still here because I have a small space. Even where I could literally see the things sitting there, they became part of like the wallpaper of the room. They just merged into the background and I didn't see them anymore. So that was, yeah, I need to be much more deliberate about things. A paper plate for a palette? Yeah, absolutely. That's great, especially, oh gosh, especially for like acrylic paints where you're not going to continue to use them after the fact. I have some actual paper palettes. Like in the class with the kids, that's what we actually use. Let me see if I can grab them. I have a cheap one here too, and they are pretty cheap. It's literally just a notebook with 40 sheets of palette paper. Oh gosh, and the paper is like, it's very sleek and shiny. It's not so it's not porous. It's sort of like waxy. It's got this very slippery finish on it. So you can just have your notebook here, put your colors on there, paint, and then when you're done, you throw it away. That's what we do with the kids in the school for when they're learning at the art studio. But I've tried to work a little bit more sustainably. I do have a glass palette. I used that last week when I was painting with acrylic. Not too bad to clean that if you have the right kind of scraper blade, which I have in here somewhere. I just got this. It's a bit of it like a safety blade, but it's flat. So you just push it out like that. I'm sure anybody who works with oil probably has something like this, but in case anyone doesn't, that makes cleaning a glass palette pretty easy. I'll put some in the fridge. Oh, putting the oils in the fridge on the paint? Huh, you know what? That's pretty interesting. I'd have a hard time finding room in my fridge for that probably, but that's very clever, especially if it works. I wouldn't have thought of that. I'd have this. I've been using this also as like a stay wet palette with a little, like some damp sponges, and then you put the paper on it, and this will keep things for quite a while. But currently not using. The problem with this one is I didn't buy the actual, there's an actual stay wet palette. I just bought a thing that I could use. And the problem is because the top's attached, when you're trying to work with it, this is your palette, and it's very unwieldy and in the way. That's the downfall to this thing, the downside to it. But it is nice to not have to worry about them. I actually have a really old palette. Check this out. This is a paper palette as well. This is sheets, and it's got the little you can hold it and paint with it, which is kind of cool. It's extremely brittle because this is another one of the things that my dad had. This was his back when he painted. So the pages are quite brittle. I've used it a little bit. It's kind of clever. Why not? I have it. It's still good. It still works. That one's a fun one. Yeah, and I've taken so much stuff out of my organized little shelf here that I had things so neatly put away. I'm like, oh, look at this, look at this, look at this. And they're all in a stack in a pile on the floor. And at some point, maybe today I'll clean it up. Maybe. There's something that I'm seeing that's bothering me. And it's right here, because this, when it was, my reference, she just had her tongue sticking out. But with this shadow doesn't make sense anymore. So I need to bring the shadow in further. Gosh, so awkward. Yeah. Oh, is that right? No kidding. Yeah, it's big and awkward, and I mean, it does the job. I'm not going to rush out and buy something else, and I have all this random stuff that I can work with. I'm not hurting for anything here, but you try things. I mean, you gotta try. It's nice to cover it up and not have to worry about it at a point, though. I got this very saturated with that last layer, so this is gonna need to dry for a while, this part here. But I might be able to put one layer on here. I am going to soften this shadow here, because that was really not working for me there, that hard highlight. Okay. Should not be still putting water on this because it's very saturated, but I am, because I am an agent of chaos in my own studio. Flirting with danger. Okay. Yeah, let's put a layer on my cactus. I have to believe that this is a towel that I had when I was in. I almost did it again. I almost put this in my coffee again. I should not have them by each other. Too late now, but future reference. I need to make sure I'm putting things further away. Okay. So we'll go with a green tone. Let me get my pipette out again. This makes things much easier for mixing colors for space when I'm working this large. Keep some of my blues. Okay. Put a layer over this. Now that these little spots have dried nicely, I'll do a wash. Start to set a color tone there. Let's see, what do we want this to be? I'm going to need to break down and actually wash up this palette pretty soon. Maybe a cooler tone to that. Let's start with that. Now I have the reference for a reference for her face that I worked from, but I did look at a picture of a cactus for this, but I'm placing it in a world where I've established where there's an established light source. So I have to match that. Light's coming from here on the far side of her face and above. So I need the same thing to be happening on my cactus. So shadows on the edge here, strongest, and cast by the back of her mouth. Add a little bit here. Yeah. Okay, for now, I will continue to accentuate the shadow. Lights might stay pretty close to where they are now. Brush up this edge a little bit. Probably add some pink tones into the cactus also to keep things a little bit cohesive, but it'll of course primarily be a bit green. It's pretty goofy, but I'm cool with that. Too flat on her head. Been neglecting that area because it's pretty flush with the highlight, but it's not flat. Okay, well, progress is being made. This is probably a pretty safe area though to start to basically take a break and let the paper really truly recover from what I've done and come back to it with both fresh eyes and fresh intentions. Would probably be good. So I'm getting to a point where it's going to be a lot more refining. There's still some sculpting that needs to happen for the depth, to get the depth correct. And then I can really start focusing on the features at that point. Just a little bit here. And yeah, we'll keep going from that point, from there. I say that and I keep working. This is... Okay, I'm done. I'm stopping. No more. Yeah, that's not bad. I've been at this for about an hour and a half. It's a pretty good start. I don't think you missed too much, Mary Beth. I really started with, I had the face done. I sketched in the cactus and laid down just, I think, maybe 1 or 2 layers before at least I noticed that you had joined. But yeah, of course, feel free. The video will get posted once YouTube can process it. And yeah, this is a good place for me to stop working on it at the moment. It's still looking very flat and artificial, but to me, the face. But that will get fixed. At least that's my plan. I intended to fix that and make that work out a little better. Yeah, and I'm really going to try to not screw with it. This is really hard for me to, like, once, especially watercolor is sitting here, that I don't fuss around with it. Like, every time I happen to step foot in here, I'm going to try to leave it so that you can see my process. Awesome Cloud, hello. I was just wrapping up the stream today and what I've gotten done so far. But yeah, I think that's where I'm gonna let off. It's a good start. It's really bothering me how very flat and like artificial it's looking so far. I won't put any paint on it. I will think on it. I will look at it. And we'll get it worked out. So, yeah, I mean, thank you guys for joining. I really appreciate it. It's fun to chat about nonsense, and I stayed pretty well on topic about art today. That's kind of a change. Usually I'm rambling about horror movies and things. But thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you, and it's fun to work with people. And I hope you'll be back here. I will probably continue with a Thursday evening stream. It might be... Yeah, I'll post the time here as an upcoming video. Try to share on Instagram ahead of time, but it'll be Thursday afternoon / early evenings, and Monday mornings are my kind of times. Thank you, Maribeth. Have a great time, everybody, this week. Have a good week. Be creative, have some fun, and of course, stay safe, stay warm. It's winter out there. All right, bye, everybody.